Good morning. Today's live match is from Meadowlands fishery on Waye Sharmans' 50th birthday match. There's how many's here, Wayne? 51. There's 51 fishing, and I've drawn on peg Warren 24. I'll show you the peg. So it's in the middle of the bank. It's a big lake, but it's a very shallow lake. He's a wave, birthday boy. There's Waye Sharman. Daly, the man, biggest mariner in the game, next to him. We're both going to have. Give us a wave, Steve. me and Wayne's ears could be bleeding come the end of the match. Well, we'll see how we go. Have a good one, fellas. Right, so I think this is only the third time I've ever been on this lake, and the first two times were both in the summer on the Matrix Champs, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. So after I drew, I asked a few people what they thought of it, and I had a few pulled faces, a few saying it's not very good, and then I've had a couple of positives saying chuck to the middle with popped up bread or a wafter. You might catch some carp there, so happy days. At least it gives me something to fish for. Now, I'd always planned to fish for skimmers. I was hoping really to be on the big lake because I wanted to fish for skimmers on there really. But hey ho, I drew on here. I still put a skimmer line in at 14.5 metres, which was around 3.5 to 4 feet deep. So I put 5 balls in there of F1 dark with a bit of fish meal green in, Sonia Bates fish meal green, and I laced that with chopped worm, casters and a few maggots. And while I was feeding, Steve Daly, 2 pegs to my right, had a carp on the bomber bread instantly. So at least that gave some hope that there was some fish around to be caught. So my plan was to feed the pole line, put 5 balls in at 14.5 metres, never fed anywhere else, and I intended to leave that alone. I'll hopefully catch a few carp early doors, and then later on switch to the pole and catch some skimmers. That was the plan. Turns the camera round in a minute, focus them on you. So once I fed them lines, I picked up the rod, which was loaded up, ready for bomb and bread. Same as my normal setup, it got a KKH hook with an inch air on it with a bait spike, and onto that I put 3 discs of 10mm punched bread, and I threw it not far, I just threw it so as I could work my way out if I didn't get indications. But I hoped, after seeing Steve having that early fish, I hoped it wouldn't take too long before I had one. There's some big carp in this lake, so you've got to gear up. I was using a 30-gram Supera, 10-foot Supera, and £6 sinking feeder mono, and an O21 hook length. If I hooked some, it was coming out. Now I've sped this bit up because I never had a single indication in the first 2 hours. I tried popped up bread, I tried a wafter, I just couldn't get a bite. I tried white wafter, orange wafter, just could not get any indications whatsoever, no liners or nothing. Kept chucking further and further and just nothing was happening. The pegs to my left, none of them had a bite. Wayne to my right in the first 2 hours, I think he had 4 fish. Two on popped up bread, one on a wafter, and one on a method. Steve Daly hadn't caught any more. It was just really hard. Watch what happens here. I was attempting to launch it a bit further out into the lake, so I took the rod a bit further back and I've up my cap, my hat, that was sitting on the bank behind me. That was the highlight of the first 2 hours. Them mats keep you lovely and warm, but they don't cast very well. And that was that. Time to have a look on the pole. The only fish that had been caught in my section up to this point was the chap in the corner pegged to my left. I'd had a little tiny skimmer on the method, so my section was still to fish for. So I dropped on double red maggot and gone out to have a look, see if I could catch anything on the pole. I'm using a 4x14 F1 maggot on there. Like I say, it's not very deep and there was hardly any tow on it, so I could control that perfectly. And I was quite surprised when it actually went under. And it was a decent fish as well, to be fair. Awkward shipping with that high bank behind you. Lovely stamp fish. If I could catch them all day, I could leave the rod alone. That fish alone took me from joint last to winning the section at that point. Yeah, that's more like it. Joint second to... I don't expect one that size for a job this. Just hoped that I could keep a few fish coming to at least keep me interested. It's boring sitting on the rod when it's not moving and you're not getting any liners, no indications to try and figure out what to do. It can be very boring, and that's not my style. I like to be busy. Even if it meant catching fish this stamp, I'd be happy. Especially as nobody else in the section was catching anything at all. So this time out I put a small cad pot on the tip of the pole and put some casters in it. Ever so awkward shipping out, trying not to spill anything. So I was happy to continue staying on the pole, putting fish in the net, as long as nobody else in the section started catching carp. Then I'd need to get back on the rod.
I think that's what's running with that.
There was some decent stamp skimmers to be caught earlier on. Well worth catching.
How bad I'm not, I'm worth catching. Definitely worth catching.
Just a pinch of casters, probably only about 7 or 8 casters in that pot.
Put some casters in this place.
Having to be careful shipping out so you didn't spill them. And I kept varying how far out I shipped as well. Sometimes I'd catch just short of the joint of the 14.5 metre section, and then I'd ship out to 16 metres as well, and they seemed to be around that area, just off the feed. I think I even had Wayne's bum twitching at this time because I was catching quite steady. Like I say, a good stamp fish. Double red maggot was definitely the best bait. I tried a red worm, I tried a caster, I tried double caster. I couldn't catch on either of those two baits. Back onto a double red maggot and it'll go straight down the hole. I mean, it wasn't bagging, but I was catching more than anybody else in the section. I say loads more than anybody else in the section. They were still all dry at this point. So I was well in front. I was perhaps a carp in front of anybody. Had some great banter with Wayne and Steve as well. Made for a nice day out. Just a bonus to be getting some bites after sitting on the rod for 2 hours and not having a single indication. I was using Duraslip 7 in the top kit. I seem to be using that everywhere at the minute. I love the stuff. Doesn't bump the little fish, but it handles the big fish. After the initial burst of decent stamp skimmers, the stamp did go down a bit. There was still plenty of fish to be caught though. For a little while it was great fishing. So the stamps seemed to fall away and I started catching smaller fish. So I topped up with a ball of ground bait to see if I could bring some bigger fish in. That never really made much of a difference. I carried on catching, but I couldn't increase the size. So I started loose feeding casters via the catapult. That brought a lot of fish into the peg, that did. I ended up catching a few shallow, perhaps a foot off the bottom. When you consider it's only very shallow anyway, they were way off the bottom. And I came away thinking, I wish I'd have took more casters, or I wish I'd have fed more casters. I never really took many casters with me because I only really intended to put it in the feed. I did start loose feeding it and it did kind of transform the peg, and I wished at the end of the match I wished that I'd had more time at it, loose feeding that is. I'll have to keep that in the memory bank for next time. But the inevitable happened. The guy on the end peg in the corner started catching carp, and that was game over. I needed to get back on the rod and see if I could catch a couple, which was very disappointing because I was enjoying myself. So the last hour I've spent on the rod, chucking it as far as I could into the middle of the lake with popped up bread on, hoping, praying for a carp, which never appeared. But never mind, I'd had a nice day's fishing in the end. Like I say, great company. So my fish went £10 8 ounces, and the chap on the end peg weighed £28. So I needed a few carp, at least two of the decent stamp carp to trouble him. There's no way I was ever going to catch that of skimmers in the last hour or so. So never mind. Steve Daly, his two carp went £8 something. Waye Sharmans 4 went £35 and he actually won the lake. And I ended up second in my section with £10 8 ounces, and I don't think anybody else weighed in. There was a few dry nets on the day across both the pools, but still a nice day out. So if you enjoyed watching this and you'd like to see more, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.